Well, hello again. I'm Carl Mills, and today I'm going to be demonstrating to you how I make the pegs for the violin. It's a very simple process, and where I start out with a pattern that I want to make. And this pattern I take and glue to a piece of 1/8 inch thick board with 3M77 spray adhesive. Then I take that pattern and I cut it out, and I end up with a shape much similar to this, a half section of a peg, only 1/8 of an inch thick. I smooth the edges down real good so that my duplicator will actually slide real easy on the wood. Then I mount it into the clamp provided in the duplicating machine. You could also turn the pegs by hand if you chose, but I find it's time consuming to get everything to match perfectly. With the duplicator, all I have to do is chuck everything up, run the pattern, and I've got at least one set of matching pegs that are all the same diameter. My next step, I take and I cut a blank. This is African rosewood. It's 3 3/4 inches long by 1 inch by 1 inch square. I drill 1/8 inch pilot holes on the center at each end of the peg. And then mount the peg, the peg blank, in the lathe. And the pilot holes actually help me to get it exactly on center. You don't want to apply too much pressure when you're clamping it in place with the tailstock, because it could split the material that you're using. Now I'll start out by just taking off the edges and rounding it off. I'm going to leave about a 1/16 of an inch on each end of the blank, so it'll end up with like a cone, but it'll still have the square spots on it to help me in a step later on. Those lines I just put on are just to help me position the cutter. As you can see, I still have a little bit more to take off to make the blank round. This is the highest point on my pattern, right here. This guide pin is what actually controls the depth of the cut of the cutter assembly. Since I'm real close to the pattern, I'm within about a 32nd of an inch. So what I'll do is I'll just start centering on the high spot on the pattern, advance it in, and then slowly move away from the high point toward each end. I'll continue this process. As you can see, the peg is actually starting to take shape from the pattern. That's why you start out in the middle of the high point and work toward the end, so that you're not trying to force the cutter to go uphill on the pattern. You want it always to slide downhill. Here you can see I've went ahead and finished turning this peg down. I've already got the other 3 pegs turned. So the next step will be to remove the duplicator from the lathe and put the tool rest back on. In this section here, I left it a little bit heavy because that's where the beading is going to go. The shaft diameter for the peg is 8.5 millimeters. The knob diameter on this set of pegs is 22.5 millimeters in diameter. Next, I'll be putting the beading on. This is a beading tool that I made. Each little bead is 1 millimeter in diameter. The space in between is 0.5 millimeters. I made this beading tool out of a carbide bearing scraper due to the fact that I could not locate one of this size for what I wanted to do. And that quick, you just put a triple bead on the peg assembly. The next step would be to undercut back into the peg knob itself. This tool that I'm using is actually a modified captured ring tool. Alright, I believe that's deep enough. And what we'll do next is I'll remove the peg, and then I'll trim off this end and this end after I set the radius on the peg itself.